Hello, everyone, and welcome to Basement and Remodeling Basics. This is an online education series brought to you by Blue Sky Remodeling. I'm your host, Mia Voss, and I'm excited to bring you the second edition of this show, and it gives you all the information you need to know if you're thinking about remodeling or redoing your basement or your home, all the information you need to know so you have a spectacular project at the finish. So today we're going to talk about financing your project. Money, money, money. That's what everybody wants to know. But before we get started, I want to remind you to go to YouTube and subscribe at Blue Sky Remodeling. All kinds of great information there. And then you can also go to Facebook and follow them. And then go to blueskyremodelingdenver.com. And we have a free basement finishing cost estimator. Definitely need to go get that. And you can sign up for their newsletters as well. So, again, I'm Mia Voss, and today I'm talking again with Adam Rossi. He's the president of Blue Sky Remodeling, and he's going to tell us everything we need to know about financing our project. So, welcome, Adam. It's good to see you.
Good morning. Thanks, Mia.
We're back again. You're going to tell us all the great information we need to know. Are you ready to jump in real quick, and we'll just get into the questions because we have so much to go through.
Yeah, no, sure. I know today's going to be a little more of a question-answer session rather than a show and tell. So I think we have some good information to put out there for not only our clients, but anyone listening in too. We have a lot of stuff to cover. So yeah, let's get into it.
Absolutely. Now that's what we're here for. Okay, so the first one, this is the #1 question that most homeowners have. I'm going to read this real quick. I know that when they're considering adding to their home, either by doing a home addition, popping the top, which you all know is putting on a second little layer on it, and then also finishing your basement, the biggest question is, what's it going to cost? So let's jump into that.
Yeah, that is obviously the heart of the question, to figure out what makes sense to invest into the house and why you want to spend that much money versus moving. And so that's really the big first toll gate, is to figure out if it makes sense to put the second level on the house or a large addition on the main level, and how much is it going to cost? Does it make sense to kind of put that investment into the house? There is some general rules of thumb out there that a lot of builders discuss. $100 or $150 or $200 a square foot. They all can be right. It really depends on what goes into all the details. So the main thing I tell clients is generally assume $175, $200 a square foot. It can be as low as $142. But let's get into the conversation with myself, the builder, possibly bring in an architect, talk to a realtor, and figure out from all three sides how much the project really is going to cost, based on what the family needs. One pop top is it's definitely not like the other ones. I've never had two in a row that were really very, very similar. But costs sometimes can have a linear path.
Well, that makes sense on the pop tops too. I mean, you're dealing with an existing structure, right? So it could have been who built it, how it was built originally, how old it is, what the foundation is like.
That's exactly right. What we're building onto or around, meaning the existing property, the existing lot, depending on what city or building code jurisdiction you're working in, may allow different heights of the buildings, different footprints of the buildings, and possibly even different shapes. If you're under any kind of landmark historical designation, sometimes there's some requirements to make the building of a certain shape or use a certain materials for it, and that can always lend to cost. Materials and size are your two biggest drivers of cost, obviously. And then if the building is old and needs some structural work, prior to putting the additional weight onto the building, that's why we'll consult with an engineer during the course of the design build to, I guess, survey the existing building to make sure that it can withstand the weight, or if it needs any structural amendments, and that can lend some cost as well.
Right, because you really don't want your pop top to end up in your basement, do you?
Yeah, right. Yeah, we definitely don't want to turn a two-story building into a pancake, for sure. And
So
knock on wood, that's never happened.
Yeah.
As long as you consult with the professional structural engineer along with the design, and you're familiar with the type of construction, that's very, very easy to kind of risk manage the potential of a failure, and that's very, very unlikely once you look through the entire structure.
Sure, and you get the structural engineer, and then you're all fine. So tell us again what the average numbers are.
So average numbers, I think you can expect, again, if you go a little smaller and you're adding a kitchen and a bathroom in there, your dollar per square foot is going to be much higher. On average, around 175 to 200, I think, is a good starting point to just assume that you're going to put that into the building. Most of our second stories, however, are, I think, in the 140s to 160s. And that's generally because we're not adding much as far the way as foundations and adding to the existing footprint of the building. So your second floor is always a little bit less cost than adding on more on the first floor, just because you don't have the excavation and extra foundation work if your building's able to support the second story. So a lot of times for cost controls, we'll try and do as much as we can over the existing footprint of the building.
Right, right. And now, and do you just suggest that people really try and keep that top number in mind so that they're pleasantly surprised at the end of it if it's a little bit less?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's really smart to go in reality, and I call it a little conservative reality, with an extra 5 or 10% kind of conservatism. I do that with all my clients during our design build. I'm personally responsible for all the estimating, the collation of all the different pricing through my subcontractors and materials pricing through my vendors to help them establish a very early realistic price so that we can kind of work that down utilizing their budget target in mind during the design. So we let the budget drive the design, and at the same point we let the design reflect what the family wants to do, and we try and keep the two really in parallel and in synchronicity through the whole design build process. That way we don't over design a project that they love and it's $50,000 too high, or we have $25,000 left in a budget and they would have really appreciated a little extra room on the master suite, or maybe having a nursery or something. So it's it's a ballet of information.
Right, and getting that right the first time, because you really can't unring that bell once you've got it already started too. And you know, what's great about what you just said, that's a rule of thumb that anyone can use out there too, even if they're not working with you. This is the type of, how you're describing it is the way the process should go, so that people can think about every single step they need to know, right?
Yeah, sure. And they'll probably talk, it's always great to talk to 2 or 3 contractors initially to get a feel for how their company is set up, what kind of experience they have with these buildings, going back to our pancake discussion, and also making sure that they're professionals at estimating and that they've got a really large variety of subcontractors that they use so that they're able to control the construction environment and the pricing environment. The biggest fear, I would say, going into a large project is that if the builder has made a 20% mistake on how much things are going to cost, you end up with $30,000 and $50,000 and $100,000 overruns on the project from what the client initially thought they would spend, and that's where you get into major problems. So you want to make sure that during the design build, and we talked about that a little bit in our last program, maybe we can designate a whole program to discussing what that kind of the design methodology really is, but it takes several months of designing and estimating to really come up with that price. So that once you arrive at the price, you arrive at the design and the material specifications, everything's starting to come in line with that target budget. And we as a company, Blue Sky, we make a guarantee for the budget. For everything that we've discussed, everything that we've been able to uncover during that design process, guarantee that budget. There's always some small unforeseens. It's always great to have a few $1,000s on the side just for the event once we do the structural demo walls, that you've got a little contingency. So use that rule of thumb as with a grain of salt to say, like, you know, your project could be $1.25 or $125 a square foot. It could be $225 a square foot. Some of the times your contractor can control that pricing level. Some are just expensive companies to work with. They do a lot of marketing and expensive advertising, and they're a big company and they have large overheads. And sometimes you're working with very small companies where you're working directly with the owner and it's just him and his son, and they may take 12 or 16 months to do the project. But it's the bigger companies that usually do them a little faster. So we found a way with 8 people to do it fairly fast and efficiently at pretty low cost. So again, that's why you want to talk to your builder, not about how much the electrical piece is going to be or how much drywall costs, because those will be fairly standard through the industry, but really who your builder is and how much your builder is going to cost them to run the project. And make sure it's a 6-month project or a 5-month project and not a 12 or a 15-month project. Because there's a lot of costs, obviously.
Oh, go ahead.
There's the costs outside too, and I apologize. This might actually be one of our questions that I saw come across from one of our viewers. Was, are there any other costs? Well, certainly there's the cost of displacing the family, temporary living, situation, as well as storage of all the contents. In a sense, the family moves out from the home during the project. It's just too intrusive, and the construction is just too large scale for the family to be able to live in the house during most of these projects. and so there you have to accommodate another 10 or 12 or $15,000 maybe to live somewhere else for the 4 or 5 months and also store all the family's things. So it's a long answer to your question.
I'm like, go ahead, preach it. Well, I love it. You said that everything is a rule of thumb with a grain of salt. That's a perfect way to put that as well.
I got a caveat. It's kind of like being a lawyer.
That was a good one. And of course, time is money, so that's a huge cost too. And thank you for adding that into the time of being displaced from your home, depending on what you do. So that's great. And listen, if you're just tuning in, you are watching the Basement and Remodeling Basics education program. I'm your host, Mia Voss. This is presented by Blue Sky Remodeling, and that guy giving us all the information is President Adam Rossi, and he's given us a ton of great info. So listen, I'm going to go on to the next question. So does it make sense, let's see, so if you have an older home, let's say in Denver, from a financial standpoint, what's going to add more value to the home? A pop top, a ground floor addition, or a basement?
Without a doubt, the second level, or the addition as well. Square footage in most of the cities, probably around the country, I'm sure Denver's not the only one, but it's the square footage that's livable for the family. Also taking into account sort of those real estate MLS type terms, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms. The aesthetic of the house is super important, that the house is pleasing in the neighborhood and that it looks right, that the inside is professionally done so that you can maximize what a potential buyer would view it as worth, what a real estate agent or an appraiser would appraise the house. So the more square footage you can add, certainly there's a cost per square foot that most neighborhoods will sort of command. But there's that kind of that law of unintended consequences. Perhaps you could even say that you could overspend as well, just put too much into a house in a certain area. So that's why we work pretty closely initially with what the real estate appraisals would value the house at. Most city houses we can pretty much do up to the maximum amount of buildable square foot to maximize the return on investment that the family might get from the house. But also the families are generally building these large additions to accommodate an expanding family. So 1 or 2 children are now in the scene where maybe when they purchased the house, it was just the couple that had owned the house.
Right, so they're growing into it.
Just to the return on investment for the actual building. I don't know if that answered your question entirely or not, but the addition is just, yeah, that's the cheapest way to go to get the most space. Finishing basements are tricky, especially in the old city homes.
Right.
I'm sorry, Mia, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I know we've got some snow here in Denver today, so it might be cutting in our connection a little bit. So you're saying that with the older homes, for instance, like in the Hylands, in the Baker District, and things like that, you have to think about that of what would be a better fit for that. Those homes are really tough because a lot of them just have 1 bathroom, right?
Yeah, almost entirely 2 bedroom, 1 bath, and
yep. The cottage.
You asked about, yeah, like the little cottage, a little bungalow. The basements are always very, very difficult to remodel because of the ceiling heights. They just weren't built with a finished basement in mind. So your ceiling heights are generally barely at the level of acceptable code compliance for livable, habitable room being 6'8". You can have drops and soffits, but with the structure of the actual house itself doesn't lend itself very well. In the newer homes in the suburbs, we finish a lot of basements. We can talk about financing and cost of basements as well down maybe a few minutes. But these don't really follow the general new construction basements that we build in the suburbs in the newer homes that are 5 to maybe 20 years old. These homes are getting on upwards of 100 years old, big brick foundations that just aren't structurally capable. I'd say a great finish. Old concrete slab floors where the old gravity furnaces and coal chutes used to be. The head heights is a problem, and then all of the piping, electrical infrastructure down there needs to completely get reworked to new kind of strict code requirements. So a basement finish in downtown Denver can run 20, 30, 50,000 more than a basement finish up north in Broomfield, up in the suburbs where I live. So, and that's just because of all the structural work that needs to be done. And a lot of times you've got to take the old slab out, dig down, reinforce the foundation because the bricks are just sitting on dirt. There is no footings, and lower the height or lower the floor to get the head height inside the foundation. We do those as well, so we've got good practice at how to do those, but they tend to be a little more expensive square footage to build. But it's doable. Everything's doable in my world.
Right. That's just a little bit more of a nail biter, right? If it's
a little more money.
A little more money, a
Yeah.
little bit more of a nail. I actually know of somebody here in the Hylands area who has a home that's same thing like you were just talking about, Adam. It's over 100 years old, and they had to do that same thing of balance whether they're going to excavate further, because it was a little bit of a head knocker, as we like to say. Luckily, it's a short family, so hopefully their kids won't grow tall. But it's the same thing. They turned it into a beautiful space, but there's only certain parts of it you do have to be very careful that they couldn't excavate as far. So it's what you're talking about with cost, and then balancing the risk factor of it if it's stable enough. So, and then as far as I'm going to loop into a question real quick. We had Debbie Davis, who's out in the audience. Hi, Debbie, and she wanted to know if we were going to be doing a show for kitchen and bath remodels because she needs both of them. And I'd say that sounds like a request. So I think we should do that.
I think we'll put it on the books. Maybe we'll do it here in another month or two to talk a little bit about some of the interior remodels that you can do without having to add a pop top or a main level addition, but reconfigure the space inside your own walls. We've done interior remodels from bath and mudroom things inside the garage to 6,000 square foot full interior gut remodel. So again, it just depends on the budget and the investment that you want to put into the house, how the family needs to grow in the house, and what we can do to help them. There's all budget levels that we work on. Most general contractors probably do. But we can certainly talk about that. Thanks for that question. We'll bring that up in another one of our webinars here in another month or two.
With that, let me ask a very basic question. You're mentioning that it's more expensive when you start getting into kitchens and bathrooms. I'm assuming that is also because you're involving plumbing as well and additional electrical for the kitchen?
Oh, yeah, right. Plumbing, electrical, gas, mechanical, venting, and then, of course, all the expensive things that you put into the home, the cabinetry and the solid surface tops, all the great appliances and upgrades that you can do to lighting and flooring usually go into kitchens and bathrooms.
That's right. Because it's a bathroom or bedroom, you've got that. Maybe if you want to put in some kind of sound or additional lighting, but other than that, it's pretty basic. So that's what I was thinking. It makes sense. So listen, if you're just tuning in, you're watching the Basement and Remodeling Basics show. This is presented by Blue Sky Remodeling. I'm your host, Mia Voss, and again, we are talking with Adam Rossi. He's giving us all kinds of great information about financing your basement or remodeling project. So we're going to jump into the next one. We touched on this a little bit, but besides the obvious cost of construction, what are some of the other expenses that a homeowner needs to keep in mind during the remodeling? We talked about the cost of, possibly having to stay in another space, but what are some other ones?
Okay, I mean, those are probably the main ones. And when we're doing interior remodels, basement finishes, a lot of the time the family will stay in the home, but there are extra costs. I mean, think about you got to eat out more because the kitchen is taken apart.
True.
Or yeah, maybe there's you got to update that gym membership so you can shower in the mornings if your master bath is down for a few.
That's clever. You're right.
There's all those little inconveniences that are going to happen during the project, and as we design the projects, we try and match up the scope of the project perhaps with what the inconveniences might be, so we can really prep the owners to understand what the additional costs or inconveniences will be, so that it's not a surprise when we get underway and tell them that, oh, you can't use your kitchen when we're remodeling it. On the first day, it's completely demolished and down to studs. So there's no transition point. The demo happens first thing out, once, of course, permits are all approved and everything, and work commences. On the larger projects, then certainly it's storage of the household goods. Maybe they've got the garage packed with their things, but oftentimes those pod storage things or storage units are required, and then the family displaced for the 4 or 5 months that the project goes on.
So many different things. You're right. I mean, I'm sure everything from telling them don't buy a bunch of groceries right before the remodel because you won't be cooking them or you won't be won't be using them at all. So, and then you
That's
have to take into consideration possibly new furniture, right? I mean, you get this wonderful new space.
That's a great
Right.
that's a great point. Sure. Once we finish a space out, it's a beautiful new space with great new cabinets and lighting, perfect floors and great paint colors and lighting schemes, new hardwood tops, or we got stainless or granite tops. Now you need to fill the space with couches and TVs and attach some cool speakers to our surround system that we've put behind the walls. So there's those extra costs of just furnishing the space.
Right, because you get the new things in there, or you get the new space, and then all of a sudden, like I was saying, everything just looks janky. Like that old couch looks terrible. New curtains, so that's probably a great thing for anyone who's thinking about it, that they'll want to start planning a little trip to IKEA or something like that to get the new furnishings too. So if you're just tuning in, you're watching the Basement and Remodeling Basics. I'm your host, Mia Voss, and this is presented by Blue Sky Remodeling. And I think we're going to have Adam hit refresh real quick for this broadcast so we can see him as well as hear him, because he sounds fabulous and he has been giving us a ton of great information. I want to give a couple shout outs here. Again, we have Debbie Davis in the audience. Of course, Mike Bays is out there with us, and Jennifer Topolsky is with us as well. She says this is great. It's exactly what she's looking for. That is really, really good news to hear. And she has a question as soon as Adam comes back in. Boom, there he is. You like that? He's
Sorry
magic.
about that. Yeah.
No problem. But you sounded great. Oh, you're being photobombed in the background.
Yeah. Yeah, that's Mike. He's he helps me with all the information technologies here.
And listen, if you haven't been paying attention, look at those fabulous images behind Adam. They look great. These are homes that they have worked on as well. So make sure to go and subscribe at the BlueSkyRemodelingDenver.com website and check out all the pictures. Again, they've got this free basement finishing cost estimator. We're talking about cost, so that's an excellent way to get started. So Adam, I don't know if you heard the question, but I'm going to pop this in here real quick. Can you put a fireplace in a basement? And I think the picture behind you might be answering that, but I'm not sure.
Right, yeah, absolutely we can. We've got one-sided, two-sided, three-sided peninsula fireplaces. Almost any fireplace will work in almost any basement application. The main, I think, structural or kind of engineering piece we need to figure out is how to get the ventilation out of the house.
Yes.
There's certain requirements on how long the ventilation runs can be, and we can always add a booster fan if it becomes too long. And then what the outside materials are, how far the termination is going to be located above ground. But we've designed it in some pretty tight spots. So generally, I would say 95% of fireplaces will work in a basement space.
So here's a question to take it back to cost here. We'll get to basement first, and then I want to ask about pop top as well. So let's say I'm going to spend about $65,000 on a basement remodel. What's the most common way to finance that, or do people just pay cash most of the time? I mean, who's got that kind of cash? But it's a good question.
Yeah. Well, obviously there's two vehicles to do that. Under the owner financing, cash, pull it out of an account. Maybe they've liquidated one of their investment vehicles to pull some cash out. Maybe they just have a good pile of cash in their checking account that's burning a hole in their pocket. The other main, I'd say, source would be through pulling some equity out of the home using a home equity line of credit. A few years back, they were very, very difficult to get, except for the very, very most well-qualified. It's easier to get access to money now. Equity in homes, I think, has rebounded quite a bit. So the home equity lines of credit is a way to borrow 20 or 30 or 50,000 cash sometimes. Utilize it on a 10-year kind of payback. And then there's the construction loan route, which is a much bigger way to go. It almost entails sort of a refinance with the house. And if you're spending 65, 80, or sometimes our projects can go over 100,000, if you're going to put that kind of money investment into a big house, that you're going to probably want to wrap it all up into a mortgage and pay that off over a normal mortgage note, 30 or 25 or 20 or 15-year type note. So some of our clients will do a refinance, a structural loan or a construction loan into a refinance, streamline.
So that sounds like that's more for the bigger projects, like if I'm going to completely remodel, like anything over like 200,000 or something like that, you really should go in that last route that you were speaking about. And
once we get into those large projects, that's exactly right. That most of our clients at that point are borrowing into a construction loan through a national bank. We have 3 or 4 referrals here that we can, pretty consistently send our clients to discuss with them what the different loan arrangements and packages are. It's always nice to talk to 1 or 2 banks to get an idea of what their programs are, what the cost of borrowing money is. Some are better than others. There's a few that we've got preference. I'm sure every city's got their own. Just doing research with your builder, doing research by calling around is always the best way to find out who's got the best programs to borrow that kind of money.
I think that's consistent advice you're giving us across the board, is that just to check into everything. So talk to a couple different people, everything from the way the project's going to look, how it starts, what you're going to do, right? I mean, if you have if it's a certain part of town and you can only build so high, I know that's a big deal, certainly in these historic neighborhoods, as we mentioned, Hylands, where there's only there's a height restriction type of thing. And then, of course, on financing, right? Talk to as many people as you can. I know it probably gets overwhelming, but it's better in the long run to be a little overwhelmed and be very informed.
It's a great time. Yeah, great opportunity to talk to multiple at each point. And with the banks, you're looking for just a good loan package that you're going to be comfortable with, because you'll be living with it for quite a long time. Right. So I'd say borrow as little as you can, but sometimes the truth is it makes sense, especially with interest rates staying very, very low, to borrow more money now than if the interest rates start heading back north of 6 and 7 and 8 again.
So we're at almost towards the end of our show. I have a few more questions for you. So we talked about a little bit about length of time. Of course, time is money. So can you go into that a little bit more about the length of time to complete some of these projects?
Sure. We talked about in the very beginning too about talking to a couple different contractors. One of the things you want to really discover is the experience your contractor has at taking on a project, and whether it's a basement or a full entire new scrape home or something in between, to understand that is their business plan. That's what they spend their days and nights waking up and thinking about and executing efficiently. So it's not just about price. You'll probably, when you talk to your 3 contractors, see a lot of differences in price, how they present different prices. Some give you a crayon on the back of a napkin or the carpenter pencil behind their ear. They'll just sketch it on a yellow legal pad and say your project will be $200,000. Some companies will come at you very analytical, give you a full printout of all the different details that go into the project to explain why it's $200,000. So it's really signing up with a contractor. You've got a good comfort level with seeing detail and understanding what their business model really is. Banks and some of the other things you want to just look at and see what's the best financial reason to utilize, because their numbers are more straight out there. It's a more regulated environment. So that's why it's great to talk to multiple banks and multiple contractors, but for completely different reasons.
It seems like a good idea as well to do some due diligence and have them give you some references too of people that have completed the projects.
Yeah, especially when you're talking to your contractors. Absolutely right. Go look at some projects. Talk to some of the contractors' own references. And I always like to suggest that they talk to very recent references, even ongoing projects. And you can, as they go through the remodel project, they're not fun and sexy when you're going through it. There's some stress, and there's a lot of times when communications models and everything that we've got in place policy-wise, our online scheduling system, is still not enough to overcome some of the stresses of a remodel project, in which case it comes down to the professionalism of our project managers and us as the owners to convey to them that we're going to get you through it, but why don't you talk to so-and-so down the street? We got them through it. They can commiserate with you and understand it. It's tough.
That's a great piece of advice.
References.
Absolutely, and I love that. Not just references from 5 or 10 years ago. References from possibly somebody who's going through it right now, and I think they can give some good advice too of sort of how to alleviate some of the stress and pain from that too. So one final question, taxes. Let's talk about that. So quick question is, how can a homeowner project what their taxes might look like once the remodel is finished?
Okay, well, the one of the ways that your taxes are going to go up, the assessor at the city is going to register the new square footage of the house, the additional bedrooms and bathrooms, however their model is for assessing taxes or tax rates. So when we go through the permitting process, part of that process isn't just building department. The assessor's office in the city and community development is probably also looking at the new space that's getting added onto or appended into that home, and probably assess taxes. So I don't know a lot about that space, but I could probably say that, yeah, your taxes are going to go up probably as a percentage of the space that you're adding to the house. And so expect that maybe there's one more cost to me that you had asked about for an additional cost. Maybe there's another $1,000 in taxes for the year that your home taxes might go up. Again, I don't know. Don't quote me. If you have an interest in looking at it, then perhaps you call your building department and find out how they would calculate the tax increase for your assessor.
Get educated.
Get educated. Yeah,
right. Get yourself educated. Get your toolkit. I love it, and I think that is just the best thing that to get people prepared is have all this information, estimate high, borrow a little bit low if you can, and not get down to a little too out of your realm. And I think that's probably the hardest thing is people get a little overestimate and like, oh, I want this big house, and then they're sort of stuck in it and stuck with that monthly bill. So you want to keep everyone balanced.
Yep. Yeah,
absolutely.
Sure. Absolutely.
Any last minute advice for us before we sign off?
No, I'd say you just captured it right there. Educate yourself. And one of the best ways to educate yourself is talk to your builders. That's what we do. We go through that all the time. So we work in that three-dimensional space, and your builders will know all of those things. Architects generally don't know as much. Your banks will only know their place. Building departments will only know about theirs. So talk to your contractors. They'll help you through this setup of expectations.
And if you need to, just start a simple Excel spreadsheet and just pop it all in there, people, and put it all down in one spot. So, Adam, thank you so much. Tons of great information today. Love it. Love it. Okay, everyone, so thank you for joining us. We're going to have another edition, so if you'd like to be invited, please go and sign up at blueskyremodelingdenver.com. You'll get their newsletter. Also, make sure to circle them here on Google+, go over to YouTube, go to Facebook, wherever you need to go to get the information to join us. I'm Mia Voss. We've been talking with Adam Rossi of Blue Sky Remodeling, and we'll see you on the next show. Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.